All right, hello and welcome to another installment of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. This week's webinar is a special edition in collaboration with Jacana Media's Jacana Conversations webinar series. I'm your host, Melissa Howes-Whitecross, and I'd like to say a big thank you to my colleague, Andrew de Block, who stood in for me last week while I was out surveying these amazing vultures in the Eastern Cape. I'd also like to welcome all of our viewers tuning in through Zoom and Facebook Live tonight. If you're new to the Conservation Conversations webinars, you can communicate with us through the chat room and the Q&A box by typing your questions during the webinar into those different platforms, and we will be able to then ask these questions of our speakers tonight. Lee and Kersey have both indicated that they will happily take questions during the webinar, and we'll also answer any additional questions at the end. So feel free to type them in while they present, and we'll pitch some of those to them as we go. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, you can send us your questions and comments into the comment feed, and I will feed those across to Kersey and Lee. You can use the hashtag Conservation Conversations and hashtag Jacana Conversations on whichever social media platform you prefer to let us know that you are tuning in tonight. Be sure to catch up on any of the previous Conservation Conversations webinars you may have missed on the BirdLife South Africa YouTube channel. Many of you tuning in tonight are likely linked to the tourism industry, and I'd like to encourage you to watch Andrew de Block's AV Tourism webinar recording on our YouTube channel to see some of the work that BirdLife South Africa is doing to link up conservation and ecotourism in these trying times. We're proud that our webinars are free for all to learn and enjoy. And be sure to share with us, be sure to support us with the QR code you can see on your screen there. We're really grateful to all of the support shown to us so far using that Cricut QR code. You can also visit the link in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and that will allow you to get onto that Cricut donations tab if you'd like to support the production of these webinars. Now, there's just 1 month to go for you to sign up as a BirdLife South Africa Conservation League donor and enter the competition where you stand a chance to win a brand new pair of Zeiss binoculars. So please be sure to visit our BirdLife South Africa website and go to the membership tab to find out more. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of this webinar to find out who our winner for the July Jacana Media monthly giveaway competition is that will walk away with these 3 fantastic titles from Jacana Media. And when you exit the webinar tonight, you'll be directed to an order link for Lee's Tracks and Signs book that we will be talking about this evening. So be sure to order yours at the end of the webinar. You can also visit the Conservation Conversations website, where you can find links to access all of Lee's different books within the Tracks and Signs series. Now tonight, I am extremely excited to welcome Lee Gutteridge, author of Tracks and Signs from Jacana Media and the owner of Nature Guide Training, to share his over 28 years of experience from the bushveld with all of you. Lee is joined tonight by Kersey Lawrence, the first woman to achieve senior tracker status for the CyberTracker system in the world, and owner of Original Wisdom, which offers programs for ecology, tracking, and bushcraft. We are really excited to have both of you on the Conservation Conversations webinar tonight, and thank you so much for coming to share your amazing passion and skills with us. Now, I'd like to hand over to Kersey and Lee just to share their screens. And once again, a big welcome to Conservation Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you very much. It's really awesome to be here and to have an opportunity to chat. Yeah.
It's exciting and a little bit intimidating.
Just a bit. Yeah.
So I saw the question come up several times actually in the little chat box, you know, like that people have never really thought about tracking birds. So I want to start with that and just ask Lee, you know, like what is this about tracking birds?
It's just another tool in the toolkit of a birder. It's, you know, we go into the field and we listen to bird calls. So why not look at the footprints, look at the other signs that the birds leave behind in nature? It's all part of birding.
Okay, so let me share this screen here. And we can start this little presentation.
So for most people, if you had to think of bird tracks and signs, I guess you would just imagine like 3 little sticks going forward and then 1 little stick going backwards. But if that's not working, then we're going to probably just have to do a lot more talking.
There we go.
But in this cartoon by Gary Larson, I think it kind of gives you a sense of what most people would, I would imagine. I think it's pretty funny.
It's very the childlike stick figure drawing of a bird, you know, with like 3 toes forward and 1 toe back. Everybody assumes that bird tracks are all the same.
That's it. So you may wonder how we're going to put a book together covering all of these.
Well, that's a good question. How do you, I mean, a book on bird tracks, why?
Well, firstly, it's a part of a series. So I'm busy developing, with your help, of course, the first series of tracking books for Southern Africa. There's lots of tracking books, but here we're trying to follow a whole different series, a different array of information.
Out the individual types of animals and specializing.
Yeah. And each track, you'll actually find each track is so unique and so different, and in many instances, absolutely unique to the species, that you can actually identify an individual bird. So here, for example, is a track of an oyster catcher. And what I'm going to do is go through a few different tracks here to show you how incredibly different they are morphologically. So there's an Egyptian goose. You see already how different these things are. That's a track of a pied crow. This is a Burchell's cuckoo. This is a pair of tiny little tracks from the African stonechat, a footprint of a Pell's fishing owl. This is from a double-banded sandgrouse. And here's the right foot track of a gray-headed kingfisher. They don't look similar to me at all.
So before we switch to the next slide,
Mm-hmm.
I want to just point out something to the audience, and that's that if we look at all of these pictures, they're very different morphologically, but the size, we don't have a sense of the scale in these photos. And scale is another thing that we look at with bird tracks. So we want to look at the shape of the track. The tiny little track that you can see here in the middle of the bigger track is that of a blue waxbill. The bigger track is a black-headed heron.
And these are life-size.
Well, I hope there's size on your screen.
Oh,
it depends on the size of your screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, if you only have a photo, sometimes you don't know how big the track is. So how big the track is actually really important. And by the time that most birds leave their nests, their feet are the size that their feet are going to be. So you actually can narrow down your bird by the morphology and the size and by the way that the birds move. So on the left, we have the waxbill in a hopping pattern. And on the right, we have the heron in a walking pattern. And this is typically how they move. So we go by the morphology, the size, and the behavior, the ways of moving for different birds. Some birds never come to ground or hardly ever come to ground. So we can discount those immediately, while other birds always spend a lot of time on the ground. And we need to actually have those covered in the book so that we can find them and that bird enthusiasts can find them.
So how is this applicable to birders? Of course, the tracks themselves can help us to identify the individual species in many, many instances. Okay. And I also think just that thirst for knowledge and that desire to learn new things is prominent amongst birders as well. I mean, the guys that I've spent time with and the ladies I've spent time with are absolutely like devouring new knowledge.
Yeah, I think birders are one of the most insatiably curious groups of people. I mean, it is one of the biggest recreational fields in the world. And we're adding another facet to that. And it's just like with mammal tracking, you know, sometimes we don't see the mammals that are, you know, living and moving around us. And you hear their calls, just like with birds, you hear their calls. But, you know, seeing their tracks adds another facet that you can then delve into to know what's living and moving around you. So what makes you uniquely qualified to do a book on bird tracks, though?
I don't know about uniquely qualified, but I've been tracking for a long time. My first job really as a youngster was working as a tracker. And then, you know, just this curiosity and this desire to learn new things and to spend time learning and then sharing that information. building, of course, upon the awesome drawings that Louis Liebenberg did back in the 80s and early 90s. I mean, he gave us that sort of foundation. But now to take it that next step and to basically do Africa's first real book purely on bird tracks, it's an honor to have a chance to even try and pioneer something like that. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
So how did you go about collecting data for the book?
Oh, geez, that was special. So lots of hours of sitting, watching birds and waiting for them to actually walk into places where they would leave a footprint. That doesn't always happen. It really doesn't happen a lot. And of course, a lot of my friends and colleagues in tracking contributed a lot of pictures as well, in some really great contributions. But like with this little plover over here, walking down a beach, I was really excited. I figured I was going to get some great tracks. And then by the time I got there, I had a little look, and the sand was really hard as you can see on the left-hand side there, really hard to really tell what's going on.
Look at that short little stride from those short little legs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you can see the behavior of this animal. If you know that bird, you can see that in the tracks.
Yeah. The toes actually pigeon toe in, also point inwards as it shuffles along. But this wasn't really the greatest terrain, the greatest substrate, but I was super excited. It had a poop. So
can you tell different poops of birds?
Yeah, of course.
It's a very technical term.
You can, yeah. Bird droppings can, in some instances, some birds have very distinctive droppings. Birds like the African green pigeon, it depends on the season. They can be pink, they can be green. They're like this little,
depending on what they're eating.
Depending on what they're eating. There's like a little spiral of colors, and they're actually quite pretty as poops go. Some other birds, like the double-banded sandgrouse, has this wonderful little brown angular structure. It's really interesting. Some bird droppings don't even really look like bird droppings. They look like little fruits until you sort of mush them around with a stick, and then but in some species you can even identify what the species is from its dropping.
Okay, so this is how you actually document.
Well, I had to, because I took so many hundreds of photographs that I actually couldn't identify later on. But I had to go and write down in the sand next to every photograph or every series of photographs. I actually go and document.
I have hundreds of photos that I don't know what they are.
No, I did that a lot. So I've got lots of wonderful photographs that I've got no idea what they were. So I've now started writing the name of the bird in the sand next to the track. And that kind of works for me.
This goes back to what we said earlier about morphology, size, and behavior. So here you're getting a sense of the size. You need to know the size. Sometimes you even just need to write the name in the sand.
Yeah, when you see it. Yeah. And sometimes I'd like to share a little story with you. I went down to Cape Town as part of my research for this book, and we had quite a short time period to try and gather the photographs of a few of the amazing species down there. We already had quite a lot from our previous trips, but there were a few which had eluded me, like the Cape spurfowl. Anyway, drove around for a few days with my good friend, and he and I were all over the place, different reserves. We couldn't find a Cape spurfowl. I don't know how we managed not to find one, but we couldn't find one. So we went to see Carol Broomhall, my publisher, and she spoke to a friend of hers, Rob Little, and next thing we're onto the trail of Cape spurfowl. We were told to go to the National Botanical Gardens. So we arrived there an hour before sunset. We go wandering in there, and walking over the lawn is this magnificent Cape spurfowl. This guy he was the bee's knees. He had a little group of females walking right behind him. They were like cooing and just, they were into it. And he walked up to us on the lawn and stayed on the lawn. And then he walked onto a pathway which had paving and stayed on the paving. Anyway, the sun's getting lower. I'm running out of light, and I'm thinking, I need a photograph of this. So, and I understand the ethics behind playing bird calls, and it's not something I always do or normally do, but I thought I've got to do this. And so I went off on a little foray looking for a place where I would be able to actually capture the footprints of this bird. And luckily for me, a flock of guinea fowl had been dust bathing in one of the flower beds. So there's this dark, beautiful composty soil, but it's not ideal for tracking. But so I got on my hands and knees, and with my mate, the botanical gardens were sort of looking at us. I thought that they thought we were doing some kind of a treasure hunt. But we flattened out the sand and the mud and all that kind of stuff. And I stood on the other side of it, and I played the call. And this chap, this Cape spurfowl, did the most incredible long jump straight over my whole area that I prepared, shot past me, disappeared into the vegetation. I think he went all the way up Table Mountain. And so I stood there a bit bleak. All the females came along and all gently walked around the area we'd cleared because now it looked suspicious. So I sat there for a while, and a few minutes later, he came strutting back in. The head was going, was doing this whole thing, and he just walked back in. He chased off whoever it was. And I played the call on the other side, and he ran through, and he just put one footprint into this patch of sand, and I was overjoyed. One photograph, one picture, and it was like, that's fantastic. I'm definitely using this. Anyway, next morning, very early, we get up. We've got our Cape Spur file. The panic is over. At least it's one representative track. And we're on our way to West Coast National Park. And as the sun is rising behind us, we see the road is full of chicken-like birds wandering around. And there must have been 50 Cape Spur fowl intermediately spread along this dirt road. And anyway, we got lots of photographs. But anyway, that's
Brilliant.
just one of the experiences.
Oh, sounds like fun. So what are some of the major headings in the book? What types of information do you provide?
Well, of course, there's a picture of the track, and all of the tracks have been sketched. Louis' original 40 or 50 sketches have been complemented with drawings by Warren Carey, Mark Elbrock, and myself. I had to learn how to draw a little bit. And they're all quite different styles, but all of the drawings are in life size. And then there's major headings with information such as social groupings. The interesting feature the birds move, their form of locomotion is also quite important, as Kersey mentioned a little bit earlier.
The patterning in the bottom of that track there. This is a hammerkop.
This is a hammerkop, yeah. This is the track of a hammerkop, and it's got this filling inside that webbing. That's a really nice picture
really
of it.
nice. So how do you use the book to identify a track?
Well, effectively, you need to know the form of feet. So we've spoken about the size of the bird's track, the shape of a foot. For example, this anisodactyl structure, which is this is a typical passerine bird, passeriform.
So 3 toes forward.
3 toes forward, 1 toe back. And then there are other subdivisions within that. So, for example, in this case, if you know the measurement of the track, this is the footprint of a Khorichani thrush. If you know the size of the track, you can use the size key in the book to take you to your, more or less, to your right bird, and then you can use the further information.
Okay, but not all birds are anisodactyl.
No, not all of them are. But this is a whole group of different birds that technically fit in with the anisodactyl structure. You've got the ground birds, you've got the palmate structures, lobate feet. This one, sort of down on the right-hand side with the brownish background, is a syndactyl structure of a hornbill. And then, of course, the raptors with their massive anisodactyl feet. Other particular sort of peculiar groups are the zygodactyl birds, like the cuckoos.
2 toes forward and 2 toes back.
2 forward, 2 back. And you see that in the track. This one is a footprint of a mouse bird. So it is sort of hooked or hanging. Mouse birds, some of the species of swift have these feet designed for hanging. If you think of a mouse bird consuming leaves and material like that, in order to digest it, he actually needs to spend his time sunning, warming up the tummy in order to break the food down. So those hanging feet are really for that.
It's quite remarkable how the foot structure actually reflects the lifestyle of the bird.
It really does in so many instances. This is a tridactyl structure of one of the bustards. This is a white-bellied bustard. And then, of course, the only didactyl bird in the world, the ostrich with its 2 toes. And then this is a strange group. On the left-hand side, they can be anisodactyl, or they can be tridactyl. It just depends if they have a hind toe or not. But we refer to this group as the tiny piece of webbing, usually between toe 3 and 4 on the outside of the foot.
So you go from the structure of the foot to
the size.
measurement.
Yeah.
So there's a section on zygodactyl, the sections on the different structures, and you measure the track, and then it takes you straight to that section of the book with similarly sized birds in that area.
It does.
Okay. So another thing that trackers use in birding all of the time is sound, and birders use sound all the time too, of course. And this here is a picture, of course, is one of the most common birds that trackers use as an alarm system, an early warning system. I believe this one is on a buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, buffalo, are, lots of times they'll lag behind the herd and just as in the shade or in the mud. And we pay attention to birds. We want to know when we're moving into a thick area, you know, if something is in that area.
But it's not only about warnings. Give you a sense of the habitat you're going into. I suppose a less obvious example would be an African paradise flycatcher. There's a picture here of a little male. In our area where our training camp is in Gala, these guys don't migrate like they do in much of the other regions of Southern Africa. So when I'm on a walk in the morning, if I'm going through an area I'm not too familiar with, but I hear that little call of the flycatcher to a slightly more thick, slightly more vegetated area. So for me, it's a bit of a warning. Other birds as well, the snipes. Occasionally when you're coming towards a large water body, you'll hear and if you hear that sometime in the late afternoon when the birds are starting to get excited, that can also be something that really helps you. In fact, birds like Egyptian geese, also very useful, not just because they call, and they can also often call when tree or something like that, because I found them miles from water. But when you hear them giving this distinctive call that another goose is flying over, that means that they're in their territory. So now they're going to be territorial, they're going to be aggressive, and they give a particular call, the male starts to honk, and that kind of gives me a sense that I'm moving up to a large water body where there is a big enough amount of water for it to be a goose territory. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So it's not just the normal calls of the birds, you know, like the singing, the songs, and also listening to when, you know, something, it's, you know, you're talking about with the geese, you know, something abnormal noise. And I want to tell a little story here of a few years ago. We woke up one morning and lions had walked by our camp. And so we had a guest in camp, Sandy, and we walked out the lions. And we walked through a few little thickets. We were only a couple hundred meters from the camp. And the birds were just going crazy. All the little songbirds in the area were just screaming. We knew, you know, something was going on. And so we were quiet and we listened and we followed the trail a little bit more towards the sound where the birds were all alarming. And we saw this, and it had in its talons clutched a green wood hoopoo. And the wood hoopoo, as you can see in this photo, was bigger than the actual owlet. And the birds, I mean, I have never heard a more disturbed alarm call. This predator, like this was the ultimate predator for those birds in that area. And so they were just all picture that we could get at the moment, because we weren't expecting to take, you know, photos with a zoom lens or anything. So I think this was even taken maybe with your iPhone. But I mean, it was just such an amazing experience. And, you know, we would not have known that this was happening except for the calls of those birds.
Yeah, it was an amazing sighting. And just seeing that huge bird grasped by the head by this tiny owl was absolutely
And we
fantastic.
actually watched it from, it flew from this branch
to another tree,
carrying the wood hoopoo to another tree. And I mean, how strong must that bird be?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Another aspect which we just like, you know, there's nothing that's going to come close to Warwick Carberton's book on nests and eggs. I actually saw that's one of the books that you could potentially win if you've entered this competition, as I have. So, yeah, this is a nest of spectacled weaver. There's the weaver on the right. But interesting, the spectacled weaver's nest is very similar to that of a red-headed weaver, except the spectacle tends to use grasses and finely straight. As the red-headed weaver, I've found uses petioles of trees like the weeping boer bean and the African weeping wattle. So they actually use quite different materials in their nest structures. But for that kind of information, we've touched on it very gently in the book.
Yeah, but it's amazing to me that a bird could, you know, specifically isolate petioles leaves.
Yeah, they strip the leaves off. They
Yeah.
take physically take the leaves off, and then they snap it off at the
And
base.
then weave it together into this
Incredible.
magnificent home.
But that's signs. I mean, I love the signs that are left behind by birds.
So wait just a minute here. I think you should tell people what the difference is then between a track and a sign.
Well, a track's a footprint. A track's a track. And pretty much everything else is a sign. So droppings, feeding sign. Well, let's look at some examples. So in the area of the bushveld where we're based, in the Baluli, there's a creeper called Picocephalus calichiariensis. It's not a creeper, like a mistletoe. And it has these beautiful little red flowers. And then when the flowers are pollinated by the sunbirds, it then produces green fruits, which will slowly become a reddish color. And if you look at the fruit in my hand, the green fruit, you can actually see the beak marks of the acacia pine barbet was feeding on it. So they come along and they squeeze it, and they squeeze out the fruit from the center, including the pip, and that's what they feed on. So we actually know in camp whether we should be looking for sunbirds, or whether we should be looking for barbets and tinkerbirds, based upon what we're finding below the knobthorn trees. So that is sign.
Nice.
You with me? All right. So that's a nice example of sign. What else have we got on there? Oh, yes. There's another interesting type of sign.
Oh, so yeah. This is sign from a common fiscal. And we've, when I first started guiding in Africa, we were told as part of our lessons that these were these places where they would impale insects. So they would go hunting and they would impale insects and sometimes small
rodents, lizards,
or even, herps and things like that on
snakes,
the thorns or the spines of a tree or a bush. We were told that they were larders. And the thing has changed since then, that it's some sort of territorial display where maybe a male is showing off his prowess for, a female trying to attract a mate, or potentially to keep other males out of his territory. But it's become more symbolic of a territorial aspect rather than a larder, which I find interesting.
That is fascinating. And it's not only these guys that do it.
Yeah.
So there's a fondness for cute
if
little...
you're a little squeamish, maybe just turn away from
just for a moment.
For a second.
So this is a very unfortunate little rain frog. And we actually saw the magpie shrike fly in and impale it on a spike on a leadwood tree. So, I mean, this is also a sign, but how would you differentiate common fiscal from...
We wouldn't have known that this was a magpie shrike unless we had seen it.
Well, apart from the fact that in the part of the Kruger Park where we are, we don't see the common fiscal. We just haven't seen them in 5 years of being there. So it's interesting. Anyway, let me move on from that to the rather attractive picture of a go-away bird vomiting. So of course, the birds consume fruits. This is a gray go-away bird. It's been eating fruits from a kudu nyala tree. I was going for kudu berries, jackalberries from the nyala tree, and it was hard to tell what it was actually eating at first. So I photographed him as he was ejecting this piece of fruit, and I went up and had a little bit of a look later on, and I opened it up and I found black seed inside of the nyala tree. But interestingly, right next to it, I saw this little object, and I thought, oh, there's another little fruit. It actually wasn't. It wasn't another seed. This is what the dropping looks like of this bird. And I had no idea. We're going back to poo. We're back on poo again. But I thought that was fantastic. And I actually had to take little sticks and squish a whole lot of them apart to see if there were any seeds inside. That is what the dropping of a go-away bird looks like when it's feeding on the nyala tree.
So this is an enormous track, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about just knowing what's in your environment without even actually having to see it. We, in the area where our camp is, we have not seen ostrich in over 3 years, and we've only seen them on the other side of the reserve. We were driving out of camp the other day, and maybe 200 meters away from the camp on the road alongside the river, ostrich tracks in the road, going down the road in both directions. And I immediately stopped the vehicle and I said, there are ostrich tracks in the road. But I didn't really believe myself. I was trying a hippo track or something. He had to get out of the vehicle and check, because I was just like so astounded that I had never seen ostrich tracks there along the river. And there was an ostrich. At first we thought maybe it was two because they were all over back and forth. But we followed this ostrich everywhere across almost every road on our reserve trying to find it and never did. So we think it was a male that had maybe dispersed from far away, maybe looking for a new territory, looking for some ladies. But he was going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
He went to so many places on that reserve. He looked like he would. It was amazing.
And, you know, it reminds me of, we went to Zambia one time and we were working with some of the trackers there. And, you know, people are used to tracking mammals. But once your eyes open to the different worlds of tracking, the invertebrates and the birds, you know, we had this whole guide team that, whereas they were basically driving along and they'd see a mud puddle or something and they'd all stop and jump out of their vehicle and they're like looking at this and they're saying, oh, look, it's a hammercock track and this one is a white stork. And I mean, they were really excited because it's just like when you hear a bird call, you visualize the bird in your mind. And the bonus is actually to see it. And it becomes that way with tracking. You know, you see the tracks of the bird and you envision that bird in your mind. And you envision either its long legs striding out or its short little legs hopping. And, you know, it becomes like a story in your mind.
You can actually build up a picture of its behaviors, though. You can see where it slipped. You can see where it sped up. Birds like hardy-dar and the sacred ibis, they actually visually follow the trails of the insects that are moving under the mud to probe for them. They track with their eyes. They watch. They're like humans. They're like honey badgers. They track. They look to see where the trail is going. To me, that's quite fantastic. So, yeah.
So how comprehensive is this book?
Oh, wow. Look, we're blessed with 970 species in the country. Look, many of the birds that I would like to document, we have not yet documented. Although, since the book came out in February, just in time for this lockdown, we have found probably another 15 or 20 types of footprint. So we're really searching like crazy to add to it. And hopefully one day there'll be another edition. I don't know.
One of the most exciting birds that we actually have documented is the track of the crested barbet. Now, if you look at this track, this bird is actually hopping from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. So in most birds, you envision that the widest point of the track is in the front, you know, with the 3 toes forward and the 1 toe back.
Gary Lawson style.
This is a zygodactyl track, so 2 toes forward, 2 toes back. But if you look, you can see it's very clear, especially on the track on the right, that there's a reduced toe 2 on the inside of the front of the track going towards the top of the screen. This is the only bird that we've documented so far that has this foot structure. You see these tracks and you think there's something weird about this bird and you can't quite put your finger on it until you like see it a few times. And then you realize that this bird has a very, very unique foot structure. And a bird like this, unfortunately, isn't in this book. So you're going to have to wait for the revised edition. So there's plenty more out there to document. Yeah, but it's exciting.
So if you think about that structure, that's probably for the bird to be able to grasp with 2 toes up, 2 toes down, so that it can really manipulate the wood to dig its nest, like we have that picture there. Yeah. So back to your question, in terms of numbers, we've probably got about 200 species, maybe 200 and something species documented in terms of tracks, some in terms of nest, some in terms of special behaviors. So we're about quarter of the way there, I guess. So lots of work to do still.
So in addition to either a revised or a next volume, what's the next project?
Oh, after this, goodness. I think feathers would be the thing that I'd be interested in. And I mean, if you take a look at this slide here, would you believe that every one of the feathers in this photograph came off the same bird? So this is the diversity and the range of feathers on just one bird. All right, so this is a spotted thickney. The picture on the top left is the primary array of feathers. The secondaries are on the top right. The little group of feathers on the bottom left-hand side are tertial feathers, which basically are attached to the humerus, and then they would fill the gap between the main flight feathers and the body just to assist with the aerodynamics. Then the middle sets of feathers there on the lower row are tail feathers. And if you look carefully, you can see that the tips of the tail feathers are a little bit tatty from how the bird must have been like sort of dust bathing or sitting down, because they often sit down on their elbows, basically, or basically the back of the leg, you know. And then the other feathers are various body feathers from different parts of the body.
It's amazing, the variety.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So what my intention is, and Kersey's intention is with this book, we've got roadkill after roadkill, window strike after window strike. We are collecting.
No birds were harmed in the making of this project.
Not by us. So we are absolutely not harvesting any birds in any way. But we want to put together photographs of this sort of type. We have things to still learn about the photography that is coming on. I think we're probably close to 150, maybe 200 species. Yeah. We've been doing this for several years now to try and put together a collection. And we would like to be able to put together
images,
measurements for feathers, so that you can be on a walk out there in wherever it may be, in your garden in Johannesburg, in the Kruger National Park, in a local park, that you could pick up a feather and potentially identify what bird it is and where on the body the feather comes from. In some instances, like for example, in the secondary feathers there on the top right, I think it's 4, 5, and 6 of the secondaries are all exactly 12 centimeters long, and they have the same pattern. So there's certainly some birds where we're not going to be able to separate it down to the actual feather, but hey, it's not too bad to be able to say, well, it's either secondary 4, 5, or 6 of the right wing. You know,
watching the process of your evolution over the past year and a half since you started documenting.
Are you saying I've evolved?
Yes.
Thank you.
Documenting feathers, like you're very good at picking up a feather and saying what species it's from, and potentially the side of the area of the body. Mm-hmm. But when we don't know, I find that it's really cool that we have this collection now that we can go home and we can say, all right, let's compare this to a mouse bird feather, or whatever it is.
Absolutely. We come back from a walk, and we open up these feather boxes, and we've actually learned that, like, for example, on a southern red-billed hornbill, you can identify each individual of the tail feathers to where it is on the body, because each individual feather has a consistent, unique pattern for that species. And that's like after seeing 4 or 5 or 6 red-billed hornbills' tails.
Another thing that I find absolutely fascinating, and perhaps birders knew this before I did, but just through researching birds and having them in my hands, is the blood feathers, the emerging feathers. When birds, they lose a feather and another one starts growing in. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that it happens on both sides of the body at the same time. And that makes complete sense, because the bird has to fly, so it has to be symmetrical in its lift. But these are things that I didn't think about until we started actually looking at the birds.
Certainly. I mean, and there are probably several people out there that are involved with bird ringing, and I hope we're getting this technically right. But if you look at the photograph on the bottom right-hand side, the smaller sort of array of tufted feathers, the third feather in on the right-hand side, that one with the extra long sort of rachis there, that long sort of stalk, that's a blood feather. That one is busy developing, it's busy opening up. So anyway, so this is pretty much what's next for us.
Fascinating.
We've been very busy with that. Just to give you an idea of the beauty of these feathers, I mean, honestly, I'm absolutely, my mind is blown every time I have one of these beautiful creatures in my hand. It's so sad that they're dying, but I'm just so pleased that we can actually do something constructive with these birds.
At least, they didn't die for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, so on the left-hand side here, the vertical picture on the left is an array of feathers, contour feathers, some of the different contour feathers from the body of a malachite kingfisher, which flew into a lodge window on the banks of the Olifants. I mean, look at that blue and black banded set in the middle. It's just incredible. Those are the little feathers from the crest of the kingfisher. The top central array, those bright red feathers with the tiny dark sort of primary number 10 there, that little tiny primary.
Listeners can guess that.
Yeah, I guess so.
And the one on the right.
Well, there are quite a few Turacos. So yeah, so this is the Turasin pigment, the red pigment of the Turacos, which give this incredible blue color. This is a purple crested Turaco's feathers. The one on the right-hand side, I've put it sideways, but that's a tail feather array of a black-headed oriole. Unfortunately, this one was also hit by a car. Very sad. And then the bottom set are the primary feathers of a female European nightjar. Oh, yeah. So, and I can't remember which subspecies, but Hugh Chittenden did tell me, and I did write it down, and I just can't remember. So yeah. So that's pretty much where we are with our presentation. And Melissa, if you,
once we figure out the code.
Melissa, if you have any questions from the audience, I think we might be a little bit too quick, but I'm hoping there'll be some questions.
No, that was absolutely fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting, and we've got a number of questions coming in. So I think we'll take a few of those before we jump into announcing our winner tonight. But thank you so much. I'm super excited that you're looking at the feathers. I think that'll be a wonderful book, and I hope Carol's listening. Definitely go after those feathers. And we actually had a comment from one of the audience members, Johan, saying that you should potentially speak to some of the ringing clubs to assist you guys with their bird ringing and getting feather collections and photographs from them. So that would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. The only difficulty is we would need the entire feather to be able to do this. And in some instances, we may never get that. So just to get a beautiful photograph from the ringers, which will show us at least those feathers, that would be fantastic. So yeah, good idea there.
Super. Brilliant. Then
we actually have people from all over South Africa contributing, you know. So, I mean, and, you know, if there's anybody out there that has access to a collection or something, we'd be happy to work with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Fantastic. Well, that's one of the things we love about these webinars, is it helps us build those connections. So anybody listening, please do get in touch with Lee and Kersey. So we've got a question here from one of my good friends, Anthony van Sale, who is also our species guardian for the Taita falcon. And Anthony and I have spent many hours staring at cliffs, monitoring raptors in the Bladder Canyon in particular. But Anthony says, talking of bird poop, can you comment on what we can interpret when we see droppings, particularly on cliffs? So some cliffs have a lot of whitewash versus others which have more spotting and that sort of thing. While you're sitting there, is it possible to start differentiating species based on those whitewash sprays that we get on the rocky substrate?
Oh man, I'm going to let you do
well,
that's a difficult one.
I can start. So, you know, obviously there are mammals too that live in the sides of, you know, cliff faces and on rocks. You know, hyrax comes to mind.
And they do leave large
baboons
white strips.
And things like that. You often get, you know, sign of them. But, you know, vultures and birds of prey often leave that. It depends on if they're colony nesters, if they're individual nesters. You know, you're looking for a large amount of that whitewash on the cliff face. Are you looking for just, you know, where a repeat nest has occurred? You know, I mean, so you can start to narrow it down behaviorally. Differences between raptors and you know, like hawks and eagles and things, and owls, you know, just in the way that they project their feces.
So some of the birds like Barrow's eagle, for example, they'll nest in the same place time and time again. And often when they take off, they'll defecate as well. I've seen a lot of splashing around the nests as well. Vulture colonies, you find a lot of that whitewash going down. I think there was some in the picture that I saw earlier. You showed a slide earlier of the nests in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah, Conrad. Yeah.
But to be honest, I mean, I don't think we can identify the different raptors from their poop splashes yet. Well, we'll work on it. We'll see. There might be some distinctive things. And obviously, we would then need to tap into the people that are researching these birds. Yeah. And just to, did you say it was Anthony that is asking the question?
Yeah, so we
I just want to make you a little jealous. We live in the Bladder Canyon. We are actually sat below the cliffs right now. We can't see them at the
Fantastic.
moment.
But
It's a bit dark. So for us, the tighter actually fly over where we live. So
There we go,
yeah.
Anthony. I think you need to reach out to Lee and Kersey.
Yeah, please do. But the thing to watch out for is the whitewash of hyrax as well, because they actually do have these thick columns of white that seeps down from regular roosting places. So it's a hard question to answer, but thank you for asking.
No, thank you guys. And definitely those cliffs can be notoriously difficult to tease apart when you are trying to find those signs. We've got a question here, and I'm not sure if you guys will be able to answer this one, but it's definitely one worth raising. So talking about whether we should be using bird tracks for the purposes of atlasing. So for those of you tuning in who aren't familiar with the Southern African Bird Atlas Project, this is a project that's been running for a number of years since the SABAP2 project's been running since 2007, but it's essentially a monitoring protocol where people can tag the presence of birds using the SABAP protocol. And here someone's asking whether using the actual track of a bird, if you know it's fresh and the bird was likely to have been there just before you, whether it's sort of relative to use that track in your atlasing protocol. What do you guys think about that?
I'd like to answer that if I may. Yeah. So Kersey has just spent the last goodness knows how many years putting together her PhD on tracking, on tracker utilization, how trackers can be used in science. And I can't give away too much of the information because I primarily don't understand it. But what happens is with the complexity, the advanced complexity of something like identifying various bird tracks, and some of it's pretty simple and some of it's really complex. So if someone, for example, submitted an atlas record of an ostrich, okay, that is such a distinctive track. Birds like that certainly are unmistakable. When you know what it is, and if you're even a lower sort of ranked tracker, then you should be able to, with 100% confidence, identify that species. But if it comes down to separating, let's say, for example, a Pell's fishing owl from a Vero's eagle owl, that now takes it to a slightly different level of complexity. And maybe to look at the different levels within tracking, because as with many different occupations around the world, there are different levels. You could be a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3, right up to the level of senior tracker. And at different levels, we have different levels of accuracy. And so part of the research that Kersey has done over the last 7-8 years has basically narrowed down what questions are actually easily answerable and confidently answerable at lower levels of tracking, and what questions, including birds, are answerable at higher levels of trackers. So there is science to back up the utilization of trackers for surveys, and that is part of what we do.
Yeah, so if I can just add a few sentences to that. So there is science to back that up, absolutely. But the skill level of your observer matters. That's what my
the crux of it,
PhD boils down to, is that the skill level of your observer matters. So yes, absolutely, we could use that data, but we need to hire reliable observers to collect it. Mm-hmm. And this book with 200 and something species is a doorway. You know, we still have 700 other species to go. So what happens if some of these are very similar, so similar that we can't tell them apart in the field, you know, other than by habitat or by behavior or, you know, some little difference. So there's still so much that's unknown that I hesitate to say, like, to make a blanket statement saying, yes, this data should be used, you know, for atlasing, because it absolutely could be, but you need to make sure that you hire a very qualified observer.
For example, if you were to go into somewhere like the Karoo, you could ostensibly go out and survey a large area and see whether there are ostrich, Karoo korhaan, northern black korhaan, whatever the birds may be that you're looking for. I mean, I often go to places and I know before I've even started, I'm looking around and say, there's Ludwig's busted here, there's ostrich here. Okay. So yes, it's down to the skill level and the documented skill level of the observer.
Fantastic. And I think this will definitely be a debate that'll rage on our atlasing forums, but I think you guys have made an excellent point. So thank you for your opinions and your extensive knowledge on that. Really, really useful. Now, we've got a question from Christo Fenter asking about whether you're thinking about putting this knowledge into an app platform and if that's sort of something on your radar to do.
Does he know how to build an app?
Look, at this stage, look, the book has just come out, and I honestly, my publisher, Carol, would probably have, I mean, Jacana Media have got all kinds of different approaches. They have already put this together as, I think it's an ePDF. So the trick to this is you need to be able to key it out. And there is a key provided. Right in the beginning of the book, there's a section, it's like a quick reference section, and it does say there, anisodactyl foot structure. You know, typical anisodactyl. So, and then it starts with 2.6 centimeters right up to 12 or 13 centimeters for the big ravens and things like that. So you're basically just going to measure your track, look at the track, and you open up on that page. So that is what we've done already.
So the format,
so it's kind of there.
It's readily transferable into an app,
yep.
But we haven't gotten that far yet.
No, and I wouldn't know how to turn it into an app. It would take somebody with a brain for those things.
So any of our computer engineers listening?
Yeah.
I mean, you saw the picture where we write in the sand what the name of the bird is,
yeah.
right? That's how technical.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I couldn't even turn on the Zoom. That's why I didn't help.
No, fantastic, guys. Well, hopefully anyone listening out there, you might be interested in helping you get that onto an app platform. There's a new opportunity. So I know you said you've done sort of 270 odd of these amazing birds. We've got a few people asking about specific species. I'm going to go first. My absolute favorite is the secretary bird. Did you manage to get any tracks from them?
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, what an amazing
And that one is so unique.
Beautiful.
You know, like you see that one and you just know it.
Yeah, we were actually on a tracking assessment. We were assessing trackers, and we don't get secretary bird in our area of the Balule too often. And we were down in the Manuleti working with trackers there. The Manuleti is a reserve a little further south than where we're based, sort of more central Kruger National Park for those that don't know the geography, right on the edge of the park. And I walked a few meters off the road and I was looking around looking for tracks, and I saw this track and my eyes were like, what? You know, so I circled it and came back and called Kersey, and she just walked up straight away, knew what it was.
Yeah. He didn't know I had ever seen a secretary bird
because
track before, and he didn't know if I would know it. And I walked up and I said,
secretary bird! But she said it quietly enough that we could still use it as a question because, man, we were going to use that.
We were excited.
It was a high score question. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a beautiful track.
Yeah.
Brilliant. No, I'm glad to hear it. And then Pamela Isdell, who is our honorary patron at BirdLife South Africa, but also a huge fan of African penguins and a big supporter of their conservation.
Oh, yeah.
Have you got an African penguin?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I've been down to Boulders, and I've been down to Betty's Bay and places like that. And, you know, you don't go in amongst the penguins. So unfortunately, my pictures are from off the little walkways. But yes, I've seen their footprints and their little nesting burrows. And
very unique.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like sort of, it's about the same length of the track of an Egyptian goose, obviously quite different, much more narrow in shape. And actually with one of my recent groups, we narrowed the webbed foot of a bird on the edge of a pond in the Kruger Park down to either penguin or goose. And we could happily discard penguin because there weren't many. There weren't many in the Kruger Park. Yes.
That certainly
Thank you for the question.
Caused a stir.
Yeah.
So I know in some of your photographs, you were showing the knives next to the tracks. Do you want to just elaborate again what that knife is for and why you keep it in the photographs?
All right. That little tiny knife is exactly 13 centimeters long. So when I take a photograph, if I don't happen to have a ruler in my hand, I have a very accurate size reference. So I can basically, on my computer, determine the exact length of a footprint based upon the amount of the knife that it covers. It's once again, it's not very technical, but yeah, there's a ruler on the front cover of the book.
There we
go.
go.
So there's a ruler right here on the front cover, and on the back cover there's an even longer ruler.
So you don't have to use a knife.
It's okay. Yeah.
Super. And I've seen 2 rand coins and all sorts of things used.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. I actually have a document that tells me the sizes of different coins.
Yeah.
So brilliant.
we get photographs from all around the world on different forums, and people are like, what size is this? And it's a Ugandan shilling or something. I'm like, I don't know. So we have to refer to the document and find out how big the coin is to get a sense of the size of the track. But if you're submitting a track for some kind of a question, asking on a forum, on our Nature Guide training page and Original Wisdom Facebook pages, we constantly get photos from people. Just please put in a size reference. And not your hand or your foot, because some people wear size 12s and others wear size 5s.
You can put in your car and then measure your car key when you get home and tell us how big the car key is.
Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. So it's important to get those scale cues for sure. So we've got a question from Jade Mullet asking, what led you to start writing books?
Okay, there's a long story. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So he actually was leading a guide team in the Waterberg and had written several training manuals, like reams of training materials, so that he could conduct training with the guides. And he had one of the most qualified guide teams in South Africa at that point, because he had the material and he required them to constantly go to, raise their level of assessment or their qualifications through assessing. And you went to, I don't remember the name of the show, but it was one of the trade shows, and they had a booth there advertising, their business and everything. And he walked away from the booth, and one of his guides was there and was approached by a publisher. Mm-hmm. And the publisher said to her, are you interested in writing field guides on tracking and on, the bush, because we were interested in publishing those things, but we don't have enough authors or people interested in that. And she said, well, I'm not, but here, you should really give me your card and I'll talk to Lee and I'm sure he'll be interested. So he left a card and Lee called him up and said, what about this thing, and they arranged a meeting. And he walked into that meeting literally with shopping bags, pick and pay bags full of stuff that he had written, and just put it on the desk with a crane, here, we can start with this. And the publisher just kind of went, okay, can you sign here?
Yeah, he just opened it and flicked through. He said, will you sign this? So it's kind of I love to write. I love to share information. I've always thing that I see. I mean, I have photographs of all kinds of poop, berries, and animals, and snakes, and anything that you can think of.
Thank goodness photos are digital now.
Yeah, it's easier. And so it was just luck, really. I mean, I'm blessed. It's great.
A bit of luck and a lot of work.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what a great resource that you can sort of translate your experiences and your knowledge to a broader audience. So really chuffed that stroke of luck happened. We've got a question here from Marie asking, as guides yourselves, what do you both think about online learning? Is it more and more of a fashion now to do, particularly with lockdown? And what do you think in terms of this replacing field time?
So the first thing I want to say is that online learning is brilliant. I love it. And as a trained teacher who actually was trained in different components of online learning, as well as experiential learning, in-person learning, I can say that it works. It's not as good as being in the field, as being able to touch the feathers, as being able to look at the track and have somebody explain it to you right there. It's not as good. It never will be. But if you know the methodology, if you know the right technology to use with it, then it can be very effective.
And on that note, we're actually in the next, hopefully, few days to maybe a week, going to be launching our online learning platform. It's going to be called Tracker Mentoring, and it is specifically focused on giving people a foundation in tracking. It's an online process that you need to work through, and then you go outside and you physically do the things. You can be in Johannesburg, you can be in New York City. I saw we've got guys on here from Wales and from France. You can do it there. But it's a program that we're about to launch. And of course, we're happy to give out the details of that when it's out. But you can do on But we do encourage you, once you've done that, to go into the field, go and practice what you've learned, because that is what will compound this into really valuable knowledge that will stay with you.
Fantastic. Well, I think I'll have to be signing up for that after this talk. And we've got a question from Michelle, who's asking, do the feet of birds grow significantly over their lifetime, and how does that affect identifying their tracks?
Well, there are probably a lot of people out there much more qualified to answer this than me. But from what I understand, once the birds really start moving around, nest birds particularly, their feet are pretty much as big as they're going to be. But if you look at birds like, for example, something like a spotted thickney, where the birds are precocial, they're born, they hatch out of their little eggs, they hop out of the nest, and they're walking immediately. Those little guys have got tiny feet. So yes, I mean, we saw, Franklin's, a Kurichani buttonquail, common buttonquail.
Yeah.
We saw a mom cross the road
tiny.
with these fluff balls. They were just absolutely incredible. So it depends on the bird. And Melissa, maybe if you could add to that, these birds that come out of a nest, the more the dove type birds, etc. By the time they're fledging and getting down onto the ground, I mean, their feet are pretty much fully grown, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's a very short period of time that even the birds that, have to grow into their feet, it's a very short period of time until they do.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then it's pretty much the same.
We've actually got a female crested franklin, a covey. There's a male and a female, and then there's 4 young ones that live in amongst our tents in the camp. So you'll see mom and dad's tracks, and we can still distinctly see the difference between the 4 young ones and mom and dad. So with some of the species, it takes a little bit longer. And it'll absolutely cause confusion. Same with mammals. I mean, a baby impala's feet are much smaller than an adult impala's feet. Yeah. So for that first 6 or 7 months of their lives, when they're sort of in that growing phase, man, you get confused between duikers and warthogs and sharps, racebucks, and all these other animals. It's easy to make those mistakes, but you factor in the season as well. That is part of what we need to think about.
And you look at social structure, so I mean, if you're seeing young, very often you see mom with it, at least,
Yeah.
And duikers don't move in herds of 64.
Right.
So that helps.
Yeah, I suppose that really does speak to what you were saying earlier of tracks versus signs. It's one thing to have a track, but you really need to be aware of all those signs around them and the context that you're viewing those tracks.
It's just like birding. You don't go looking for a wood owl in the sandveld of the Kalahari.
Yeah.
It's just
Absolutely.
The same.
For sure. Then we've got a question from Ryan. When you were talking about the common fiscals impaling their prey, there was a bit of a cutout in the internet, but can you just explain why the fiscals do that behavior where they hook prey on thorns and barbed wire fences, etc.?
So the thinking used to be that it was a larder, that they were basically impaling food for later. But it's changed into now it being more of a territorial display. So the male is looking to attract females and repel other males potentially. So it's changed to that sort of...
The thought process, not the fiscal. The fiscal's still doing what he always did. But
our thinking has changed.
Yeah. Well, if I look at where they hang a lizard, for example, on a sickle bush, and it becomes this piece of biltong, and you drive past, that same lizard's hung there for weeks. That's certainly not going to be an appetizing meal for anybody. So, and I also heard, years ago, someone told me that they hang them up and then flies lay their eggs and then the flies hatch and they become little maggots and then the birds come and eat the maggots. I've also never witnessed that. So, yeah, it's interesting though. It's an interesting thought.
Certainly, yeah. And I didn't realize about the territorial display thing. So I've learned something tonight. Thanks. And
awesome.
We've got another idea for your app here. People talking about, how we've got PlantSnap and Shazam for bird calls and all these kinds of things. We're going to need a track scanner for your app one day.
Look, there are apps out there that are trying to do something like that, where you sort of take a picture and it gives you an idea of what it could be. That's not my strength, really. I prefer to teach people to learn how to track. I'd still like people to have those skills.
So the way I look at it is that as human beings, we've developed these really awesome, big, complex, beautiful brains. And I hate to hand somebody a piece of technology, even though there's lots of really useful technologies out there, that can take the place of that. You know, like I'd rather teach somebody how to identify the tracks than give them a device that gives them the answer.
Yeah. So yes to the plant snap, track snap type thing.
They're great.
Yeah.
But
also understand it. And then you can also corroborate, say, well, yes, I agree. It's actually right in this instance. Because often I use plant apps and key things out, and I come up with some
birds, you know, the birding app. We use that all the time,
but,
you know, but it's usually to confirm a fact or, you know.
Yeah.
So the apps aren't always right.
Yes.
But,
that's
you know.
true.
Brilliant. And then we've just got a few questions. The online course that you guys mentioned, where will the best place be for people to sort of keep tabs on when that announcement's going to come out?
On the Nature Guide Training, that's my company, Nature Guide Training Facebook page, we are going to definitely announce as soon as it's available. And it's going to be extremely inexpensive. And on Kersey's Original Wisdom Facebook page, it will also be advertised there.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, I think, and if you would like, we can always send a message to you, Melissa, to announce it for if that's possible. I mean, just let us know what's possible.
Yeah, we can definitely.
But I mean, for those that have an interest in tracking, hopefully we've sparked a little bit of an interest. It seems like it. But for those that have an interest, our Nature Guide Training and Original Wisdom Facebook pages, Kersey's also on Instagram. I haven't figured that out yet. We're continually posting pictures of tracks and sharing information about tracking. And of course, you can always get hold of us through those message services as well.
And I just want to say that the third course in the series that we're developing, so there's 5 courses that we're currently developing. The first one is ready for launch. The third course, is it third? No, it's the fourth. The fourth course is on birds, and it's bird tracks and signs, and it's based on the book, this book. So it's basically walking you through how to use it, what all the differences are. And as a student in the forum, you get access to all of the new discoveries that we're coming out with as well.
And you don't have to do course 1, 2, 3, and then 4. You can just do course 4 as soon as it's available. Although I would highly recommend doing course 1 because that's the foundational program. The next one is mammals. The one after that will be on invertebrates. Yes, we even track bugs. And then the 4th course is going to be the bird course. So we're rapidly getting to a point where they will be available as well.
That is really exciting, and I think you'll have a lot of uptake after tonight for sure. So I'm going to wrap us up on these questions with one more of the species. Did you manage to get a Narina trogon track?
No. I so rarely see Narina trogon, but if I think of the places,
I think I've seen them twice.
Yeah, if I think of the places where I see Narina trogon, it's generally quite dense forest. There's leaflet. There's often in pine forest where you've got this thick layer of pine duff at the bottom, and on top of that, I've actually never seen Narina trogon go to the ground. I've never seen that. I'm sure that more experienced forest birders would have seen that. Maybe they go down to collect insects. But you've got to have them land beautifully on the right patch of perfect substrate with enough sunlight to be able to see it. And that's a lot of amazing circumstances. I have seen their nests. We didn't include the nest in this. I think that, as I say, Warwick's got that all covered. I have seen their nests. So there are at least signs of the bird. But apart from the call, the nest, and seeing the bird itself, I haven't seen the footprints. And it's on my list of things that I'd like to see before I die, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I think you're going to have to catch one and paint its feet and hopefully see it land on a branch nearby if you're going to catch that track.
Have you ever seen one on the ground?
I have a special tub of clay.
I see. Right, ringing is out there.
Yeah.
No, in my personal experience, I haven't ever seen an arena down on the ground, but they typically do that more hawking behavior off of those branches in the forest. So, yeah, I think you'll struggle to get a floor print.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of birds that we're just never really going to document at ground level. If you think of like the sunbirds and things, I mean, it's really unusual to see them hopping around on the ground. I mean, maybe in some areas, if people see this regularly, or if they want to document and share pictures, that'd be wonderful. I mean, imagine having the reach of hundreds of people that are out there doing that. I mean, as it is, we don't have enough friends, so we just don't really find them.
Well, hopefully,
but I mean, it's handy information. it's handy information to know, like, okay, which birds don't come to ground, you know, like that's a list in itself. Like there's the list of birds we don't have their tracks yet.
Yeah.
And then there's the list of birds that don't come to ground,
Yeah.
so that you can, you know, potentially 99% of the time exclude them.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, process of elimination.
When I was chatting to Hugh, he sent out a newsletter about the greenback Cameroptera. I mentioned it earlier. He said in all of his years of birding, which is like, geez, it spans decades. He said he has never yet seen a greenback Cameroptera drink water. I mean, isn't that incredible? I mean, so some of these birds are so unlikely to ever leave a track that we might as well just not stress about it too much.
Yeah. As you say, that elimination list is always good to know too. It helps you get to your ID that much quicker. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to announce our winner of the Jacana Media monthly competition before we wrap up. So I'm very excited to announce that our winner this evening is Sonia van der Walt. So congratulations, Sonia. You have won yourself a copy of Tree for the Birds from Vernon Head, as well as Trevor Carnaby's Beat About the Bush. And when it comes to bird signs and learning a bit more about that, Trevor's got a whole lot of info in that book too. And then, of course, as Lee has already mentioned, Warwick Tarbiton's amazing guide to nests and eggs of birds of South Africa. So congratulations, Sonia. And I really hope that you'll enjoy these amazing books. And without further ado, I'm just going to remind everyone that as you exit the webinar this evening, you should get a little pop-up in your Chrome or whichever internet browser you're using that will take you to the order form for Lee's Tracks and Signs book for the Birds edition. So be sure to check that out if you'd like to buy Lee's book. And I'd also like to remind everyone that there'll also be a short survey that you can participate in just to let us know what you thought of tonight's webinar and give us some feedback on how the event ran. Next week, we've got a really exciting talk coming up from CEO Mark Anderson, and he's going to be talking about the lesser flamingos, Kimberley's pink gems, and how their conservation story has been brought about through the many different stakeholders. So be sure to tune in next week at 7 o'clock Tuesday night, as always. We'll be here to hear Mark talk all about the lesser flamingo. And with that, I just really like to say a big, big thank you to Lee and Kersey. I have learned a hell of a lot this evening, and I'm sure everyone else tuning in has as well. So thank you both for taking the time, and a big thank you to Jacana Media for facilitating this process and for joining our two webinar platforms together. I really hope that if anyone has any questions for both of you, can you just give us your contact details so that they can reach you before we close?
Certainly. Would you like an email address?
I think that'll work, yes. And we can also put that on the website afterwards too.
No problem. So you can get hold of me on Lee, L-E-E, at natureguidetraining.com.
And you can contact me at Kersey, K-E-R-S-E-Y, at originalwisdom.com.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to put those two emails in the show notes for this webinar. And without further ado, thank you both. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Keep yourselves safe out there and keep those eyes on the skies and keep enjoying those birds. I will see you all next week and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, Kersey and Lee. Keep well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.